Ay, 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 hombre, ay, ay, ay. Ay, si la diarrea te ataca, si la diarrea te ataca, dale Bisbacter, dale Bisbacter.
Sea como sea que te ataque la diarrea, dale Bisbacter. Bisbacter, antidiarreico rápido y efectivo.
Si la diarrea te ataca, dale Bisbacter, Bisbacter.
Es un medicamento, no exceder su consumo. Si los síntomas persisten, consulte a su médico.
Semana Podcast presenta.
Hello there, Brendan Wrongway Corrigan with you for our first episode of the Columbia Cast for 2020. Back with a bang, or so we hope. And we're on location for this instalment, coming to you from the Colombian Football Federation's offices in Bogota's Parque Simón Bolívar. The reason? Well, we're here to chat with a man who will have a significant role to play in Colombia's men's team keeping clean sheets in what is a particularly big year for football here. Not only are there 8 qualifying matches for the 2022 Qatar World Cup to be played between March and November, but there's also the small matter of the Copa America, which Colombia is co-hosting with Argentina, with the final to take place in Barranquilla on Colombia's Caribbean coast. The last time Colombia hosted the tournament, back in 2001, they won it, the country's sole title. So Des McAleenan, Colombia's goalkeeping coach, absolutely no pressure in your new role, and welcome to the Columbia Cast.
Well, thanks for the invitation, but sure, yeah, I don't know about the no pressure, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, we'll see how it goes. How on earth, though, does a Dublin man, an Irishman, find himself training the Colombian goalkeepers?
Well, I suppose, like a lot of people's career, it's been a sort of long and winding road, so I don't think anybody's career is or trajectory is straight. I mean, it's taken a lot of twists and turns, but I mean, the short of it was after Copa America, Carlos had a little bit more breathing space, a little bit more time to reorganise his coaching staff, because he had not been in the job that long before Copa America. Mm-hmm. And
your boss, of course.
Yes, Carlos Queiroz. And the previous goalkeeper coach, I believe, was part-time. He worked primarily for his employers were Deportivo Cali, Green and Whites, mm-hmm. and he was not full-time. So Carlos wanted somebody full-time, obviously somebody he sort of knew or could trust, and somebody who would have had relevant experience, and obviously the most important would be somebody who could speak Spanish. So I ticked a lot of them boxes. I had a previous relationship with him. I had met him several times over the years because one of my best friends in football, a guy called Mick McDermott, who's the current head coach of Glentoran,
good club in Belfast, yeah,
in the Northern Irish League, was one of his assistants for many years in Iran.
Ah, okay.
And obviously after the Copa America, he reached out to Mick for some advice and maybe some names, and Mick had no hesitation in recommending me, and I was available also, which was a big thing. I mean, although I had just returned from the World Cup, U20 World Cup with the US, it was a part-time position, okay, which involved every FIFA date where our players would be available. I would be off with either the U18s, the U20s on various international trips.
So you spent a lot of time in the States, did you?
Yes, well, I initially went to the US in 1988.
Okay, I was 3.
on a football, or as the Yanks like to say, a soccer scholarship. So that's where I went. I went to the US. I went to Central Connecticut State University, and it was there that I got involved in coaching.
Okay, so you played in goal yourself.
Yes, I would have played for one of Dublin's most famous nursery teams, a team that produced the likes of Johnny Giles, a team called Stella Maris. So I played for Stella Maris and other teams as well. But I mean, I was living in the Dublin of the 80s, and Ireland of the 80s, and I just, as anybody who grew up in the Ireland of the 80s, it wasn't exactly an exciting place to be, and the prospects were quite dim. I mean, you either got a job in the civil service or you went on the dole.
Oh, you headed off.
And luckily I got an opportunity. It was, it just seemed like a very exciting place to be. I was very young and naive. And
what age were you?
I would have been
we can do
18, 19.
Oh, okay, so yeah, just
I was relatively young.
Yeah, of course.
But I mean, very immature and wouldn't have been exposed to anything. Because you have to understand that Ireland of that time was not very diverse. I would have never seen a black person in my life or had any contact face to face, because Ireland had no immigrants. Because there were no immigrants in Ireland. There were no foreigners in Ireland. It was just, it was, for me, a very sort of drab place.
Very parochial, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
So then in the States, did you actually play professionally?
So I played in college for 4 years, and then after that there was no actual professional, real fully fledged professional league, and then one started it was called the USL. It was a fledgling semi-pro league. So I had a bash at that for a couple of years, and you couldn't really make any money in it.
Okay.
And during that time, I got introduced really to coaching through a guy, a very famous international goalkeeper coach, a guy called Dan Gasper, who also worked with Carlos. He worked for Porto, he worked for Benfica, Sporting Lisbon. He had a very distinguished career. He would be very well known in the US. And he had a goalkeeping camp business. And he asked me, he had heard that I was playing in the local college, and he asked me would I like to come and work for the summer. That was my first introduction to actually working with kids and coaching. And he was a very good teacher, and more so clinician. And he introduced me to the art of, I suppose, of coaching and breaking down technique and working with kids. And, I suppose, not to sound corny, but I suppose I took to it like a duck to water.
Yeah, it was kind of your calling.
Yeah. And look, I was doing something I love, and I suppose it can be the ruin of you in some respects, because once you start to do something you love, you actually you don't consider it work.
Of course.
And when you don't consider it work, when you get slapped in the face with the harsh reality and you have to actually work a real 9-to-5 job, it's very sobering.
Tell me about it, Des. Tell me about it.
So it's very sobering. So, I have had other jobs along the way, but in general, I've always been in coaching from, I'd say, I've earned my living from the age of, I'd say, 19.
Wow, okay. So the States, just because I kind of want to put a full circle on this, how you ended up here, and we're having this surreal chat.
It's a long road, we can't go quickly.
So the States was the base for all those kind of formative years.
It was, and in the States, I mean, you get great exposure to a whole spectrum of different cultures, different people, Latinos, Asians, African. It's just, you get exposed to things you wouldn't get exposed anywhere else, and particularly as regards football or soccer, there was very different viewpoints, and you get exposed to a lot of coaches, a lot of different coaching styles, and year after year I would work these summer camps, and not to toot my own horn, but I had a pretty good aptitude for it. I was very good.
Okay.
And pretty soon I was directing these camps, and over the spell of about 12 weeks during the summer, I would actually be sent all over the US, to every corner of the US to direct camps. And sometimes I would show up and the numbers could be anywhere from 20 to 40 to 50 to 100 kids, and I would be the director. So it is there that you really learn the art of coaching, and you learn to, I suppose you learn you come up with your own style, your own interpretation, and you're free to experiment. And it's a great
because I guess it's
training ground. You know, it's the best apprenticeship you could ever ask for.
Because it's not, I guess, am I right in saying, like, not fully results based, so you can tinker around.
Exactly. And you know, you're constantly looking at coming up with new and fresh ways to basically teach the same subject matter. So you can experiment, and you end up, you know, coming up with a bit of a flair and a bit of, you know, your own style, your own interpretation on things.
And I guess in the 90s and early noughties in the States, like, soccer was kind of, but obviously they had the World Cup in '94, and that gave it.
Well, '94, ironically enough, I mean, the guy who was the poster child of US soccer was a guy called Tony Meola. And little did I know then that, you know, he's a great, iconic American figure in the game, you know. And little did I know that many years later I would go on to work with him, coach him alongside him, and count on him as a very trusted, dear and loyal friend. He's probably one of my best friends in football. And when in doubt, for example, if I had any, even not doubts, but if I thought about something, situations that might even occur here within the national team, I will call him up and bounce stuff off him, because he's a great sounding board.
Yeah, okay. And where did you work with him then?
I worked with him in New York Red Bulls.
Okay.
And he came as a player to New York Red Bulls at the end of his career. And he was a bit of an old warhorse. He was beat up, he was injured, but I couldn't help but marvel at some of his qualities, his handling ability, his ability to strike the ball so cleanly, beautifully with both feet. And also at that stage I had coached Tim Howard before he went to Manchester United. And Carlos was also,
and I was just going to say that
Carlos was also a connection there.
Yeah.
And it was one day after I worked with Tony that I realised that the whole shape and presence and the way Tim Howard carried himself and modelled himself was exactly how Tony Meola.
Right, okay, so he obviously...
He was very much influenced. Now, in his book, he doesn't mention Tony very much, you know what I mean, which I found to be quite strange. But 100% for me, he was a huge influence. Tony Meola was a huge influence on Timmy Howard, because Tim Howard would have been an understudy to Tony many years back. And
would you rate Tim as a friend? Is he a contact still? Or?
No. I wouldn't. No, I'm not an enemy.
Okay, yeah, that was very blunt.
After he went to Man United, we really didn't have any. We didn't really have any contact.
Okay,
you know, and I would like to think that I I stuck my neck out on him. We could get into that story later. Yeah. And made a really strong recommendation for him to go to Manchester United at a time when no American player had ever went there. Actually, Jovan Kravoski had went there, but American players had not gone to big clubs before. Mm-hmm. And this was something, I mean, the headlines in the paper said, Tim who?
Yeah.
And then it's not like he developed at Man United. Within 4 or 5 weeks of him being at Man United, he made his real professional debut in the Charity Shield. He never looked back. He won the goalkeeper of the year in the Premier League. That was the only time he won it.
Right.
And that was that was a year directly after working with me.
Yeah. So.
And with me, that had come on the back of the Goalkeeper of the Year award in the US. So people always say credit due. There was another coach who coached him and who discovered him. I didn't discover him. I worked with him. But when I'm asked, people say, "Oh, you discovered Tim Howard," and I go, "No, that's nonsense. I worked with him."
Okay.
But are you responding? You done this, that, and the other for his career, and I'll just diplomatically say, "Well, I didn't hurt his career. That's for sure."
Okay. But there's no contact whatsoever now.
No, not really, because he went on and he went his way, and I went my way, and his career is. Sort of international career and his career in general is just finished, and lo and behold, 20 years later, I'm still swinging the hammer, as they like to say.
Well, yeah, and where you are, and we'll talk about the current tasks ahead of you for the year and the next few years. But people use the term journeyman, sometimes derogatory, so almost a pejorative term. But you went from the States to the Middle East, and then you are a journeyman, but in a. But I was in the MLS for 10 years.
Okay. And initially the club was called New York Metro Stars. And then Red Bull came in and bought it. And that was a huge transformation. That was exciting to be part of that project.
I'm guessing, yeah.
So I was there for 10 years, and I had a very, very good fortune of working with some amazing coaches. I mean, the guy that gave me my break is an Ecuadorian who's working here, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't know which club he's working with. That's some club, I think, close to the frontier border, I think, with Ecuador.
Cúcuta, perhaps? Maybe
I'm not sure. Right. And his name was Octavio Zambrano.
Okay.
So he was the man who I owe a lot to. He gave me my break in coaching. He got fired, and that was an interesting experience to see somebody get fired for the first time and how it goes down, and the feeling and the sense and the whispering in the shadows that goes down. You can sort of feel it, and then it was to repeat many times in my career.
Well, we're in such a fickle industry.
Well, he was then replaced by Bob Bradley, and Bob Bradley is a very distinguished figure in US coaching circles. Yeah. I mean, I suppose he would be well known outside of the US for having a short stint in charge of Swansea.
Okay.
But he coached the US national team. He's won a lot of things, and he's very well recognised and respected. So I worked with him. After him, I roomed. His assistant was a guy called Mo Johnston, very famous Glasgow Celtic striker, who famously, after he returned back from a spell in Nantes, he posed on the front of all the British papers with the Celtic shirt on, and the next day he changed clubs. He didn't actually sign. He got a better offer and ended up signing for Glasgow Rangers and ended up being the first Catholic of the modern era to make that move. So a tremendous fella, a lot of fun. I had a lot of good nights with Mojo. Right. So he was the interim coach for about six months. And I think he brought Tony Mayola to the club during that time. Okay. And then after him, in came Bruce Arena.
Wow.
And he's like, he's probably the most distinguished coach, most respected coach the US has produced. I really enjoyed working with him, but he lasted 2 years. He was fired by actually, like a lot of people at the top in football, an idiot who knew nothing about the game.
Okay.
And we weren't that far away from winning something, and they didn't give him the time, and he was out the door. He went, and after him, before him, as if there's anyone listening here who's familiar with Colombian soccer, I worked with Juan Carlos Osorio.
Ah, okay.
Actually, twice. I digress. I go back. Juan Carlos Osorio was taking his first baby steps in his coaching career as an assistant to Octavio Zambrano. That's where we first met.
Ah.
And then Juan came back from Millonarios, where he got his first job in Colombia. He went to Chicago Fire, and after Chicago Fire, he came to Red Bull New York.
Right. And there were talks about him actually coming here, taking this job.
Yeah. He did want it, I know that for sure. Okay. So that was my second time working with him.
Okay.
And he's a great fella, a very passionate guy, a very idiosyncratic. I've never worked with anyone quite like him. And the man is in love with tactics. He really does, more than any other coach.
Okay.
I mean, he's like a mad mathematician. He dreams of schemes and tactics, and He just lives in that. He lives in that universe.
One of those coaches who you read about, that they wake up in the middle of the night and they're like...
He's very much like the Tinkerman. What was the Tinkerman's name? Claudio Ranieri.
Ranieri, yeah. Mm-hmm.
He's parts Ranieri, and his the person he looks up to most probably in the coaching world, and is also a friend of his, is Bielsa. He's a big student of Bielsa. But one, great education, great passion for the game. And we got to an MLS final. And then after he got fired, in came a guy called Hans Backe, who was an assistant to Sven-Goran Eriksson in England and also in the Mexican national team.
Right, so you've worked with some big names.
Yeah, and then I got... Without getting into the weeds, I mean, at sometimes they always say there's a bullet. There's a bullet with your name on it sometime.
Yeah.
And I took a bullet in I forget what year it was. I think 2010, and I was only out of work a brief period of time before somebody organised for me to go to Saudi Arabia.
Okay. Why were you sacked?
Why was I sacked?
Yeah, or just a change of management, or what?
I won't go into that.
Okay, okay. He's remaining quiet.
I got paid up, as they say.
No.
It wasn't just me. I got fired. Yeah, I got fired with an assistant coach. We had been there the previous year, and the director of football was Norwegian, and Hans Backe was, I think, Swedish, and I think they just wanted us out at that stage. So, but it worked out well. I got an opportunity to go to Al Hilal, and Al Hilal is called Asia's Club of the Century. Again, the name will mean nothing to the casual fan, but if anyone tuned in and watched the World Club Championships, Al Hilal were the Asian champions.
Yeah,
I mean, they're a spectacularly wealthy club.
Well, there's a bit of money in that side of the world.
Well, they are, but they are the Manchester United. And to be honest, that was the best thing that came out of that for me was to understand what pressure is. Heat.
Yeah.
I like to use the expression heat. You feel the heat in that job, not just because you're working in Saudi Arabia, but a run of three bad results will see you out the door.
Wow.
Whereas in the MLS, that would never happen.
And the football fans, because they say obviously Colombia, they're mad about their football, but that side of the world...
Oh, football, but again, because people know so little and there's so much misinformation about the Muslim world. Mm-hmm. Football is everything. There is nothing else. Because the Saudis, there's no movies, there's no soap stars, you don't hear music, there's no advertising, you don't even see, I don't even think there's even mannequins in the windows of it's such a strange, closed world. Obviously it's changing now with the new ambitious young prince, but the only outlet for expression where people can go and cut loose is at a game, and they love their football. We would show up at the airport if we're playing against a small provincial team, and half the town would have showed up to meet the team. You could have about 5,000 people outside, like a scene from, I showed you photos the other day, like a scene from Beatlemania, and we were trapped. I've got pictures of us, like 100 people deep trying to fight our way through the crowd to get on the bus.
Wow.
We played anywhere, the stadium would be packed hours before. If we played our rivals in the cup final, we'd be playing in the King Fahd Stadium, 82,000 people, 82,000, yeah,
wow.
Sold out. And so the benefit of working there was pressure. Understood what pressure was, understood what it was to work for a huge team. You go to the bank and people would know who you are.
Right.
Like, shit.
You were a bit of a superstar there.
Well, people knew that you worked for Al Hilal.
Okay.
And the other thing was I worked again with some phenomenal coaches. First coach I worked with was Thomas Dahl, ex-Hamburg coach, okay. Borussia Dortmund coach, ex-German international. Then he was replaced by a guy called Ivan Hasek, who was a Czechoslovakian coach. Then he was replaced by Anton Kombare. Anton Kombare was coach of Paris Saint-Germain before Ancelotti took over.
Wow.
So obviously these are not lightweights. And then he was replaced by a guy called Zlatko Dalic. Zlatko Dalic was coach of Croatia,
Right.
still is, when they got to the World Cup final.
Yeah.
So I was working with them. Then I also worked with a whole slew of national team goalkeepers there, but I caught the very tail end of Mohamed Al Daya, 3 or 4 World Cups and 170 something caps. So again, when you work with a guy like Mayola, Howard, not saying that they're arrogant, but they carry some weight. So when they walk in a room, you know they're there.
Okay.
They'll make you know. They've just got presence. And unless I think you've worked with these type of players, it will be impossible to do a job like this.
Do you have that presence now, do you think?
No,
or do you want it?
No, I was always confident of my own ability, but working with them guys, and then another guy who was a notoriously difficult goalkeeper in Holland. He had a huge reputation. His name was Ronald Vaterus. Like the Dutch always like to pose the questions, and why is this and why is that, and he was a very interesting character. He played many years for PSV Eindhoven. He also played for Glasgow Rangers, and it gave me a lot of confidence working with him, because when I had read the stories about him, and he was always supposed to be an extremely difficult person to deal with in personality, and we got on like a house on fire.
Right. Because I was going to ask, and I am going to ask, like, obviously you didn't have a successful professional career playing in
I was an average player. Yeah. I had the realization from early that I just simply wasn't good enough.
But does that weaken? So because if to be the coach then of these guys, and they're kind of going,
I'll tell you what these guys don't want to hear. These guys don't want to hear a guy boring them to death with stories about, well, back in my day when I used to do it this way. That is the number one turn off. Okay. They don't want to hear shit like that. They're not interested.
I guess they'd probably know after a few minutes if this guy knows.
A guy like Ospina, if you arrive and you meet guys at a certain age of their career, you're not going to change them. You're not going to do. You can freshen up the routine. Then maybe different ways of doing things, and you have to. It's very psychological. You have to be a great listener. You have to know when to say the right things. You can't butter them up, but you have to have a really good eye. You have to have a really good eye, and you got to know how to handle them. And the work's got to be good. I'm very fortunate that again, Ospina. I can't say enough.
Do you learn from him as well?
Absolutely. Yeah. But I'll say something. I will be like, I went to visit him in Naples there before Christmas. We'll be having conversations, and I'll be telling them stories, and you can tell that they're generally interested, because there's stories about other fellas I worked with, the similarities and situations and things I've seen and stuff that's going on in the club. Like I arrived in Napoli and you could feel the tension because the coach was about to get fired, and when you've been in that situation, you can sort of sense these things. You can see it on the training field. But he is a class act. I tell you what, I really, really like him. Fortunately, he's a very good friend of Juan Pablo Angel, who's a much respected, much loved player here. He played for Nacional, played for River Plate, played for the national team, and probably the first Colombian. Maybe that's not true. Maybe Asprilla was, but it was around the time of Asprilla. Juan Pablo went to Aston Villa and scored, I think, close to about 20 goals in his first season. So I had a really good relationship with Juan Pablo Angel. And till this day, I will say, screaming from the rooftops, Juan Pablo Angel is the finest professional I have ever met in all my years.
Yeah.
A stand-up guy, an example to all, a guy of great class and integrity, all the great qualities that you would want. If you're a young player and he was on the field, you learn so much from him.
Humble as well, because
his humility, everything. Just the best. I mean, I can't, of all the players that stand out in my mind, Juan Pablo Angel for me will always be the top of the charts, untouchable.
Because
and he's a very good friend of Ospina's.
Of Ospina's, yeah. Okay, because I guess we've kind of come full circle in that you were in the Middle East, and then because I just wrote how you ended up here in a sense. That
I forgot to tell you. I then came back from the Middle East, and
did you leave of your own accord?
Well, I'd survived about 4 coaches.
Okay,
and as I say, there's a bullet in the chamber for somebody. You can't keep dodging bullets.
Yeah.
Somewhere along the line, the coach comes in and says, "I want this guy out. I'm bringing in my own guy."
But also for freshness. I mean, I've played football as well and Gaelic football. You know, sometimes you want a different voice as well after a while.
So I came back. I had made some decent money, enough that I didn't have to be like worrying about the next paycheck. But I made a huge mistake. I came back, and
to where I was going back to the States or to States.
And I really need to. I love coaching. Mm-hmm. Coaching gives my life significance, and it doesn't have to be professional. I particularly love working with kids, and I sort of felt lost when I came back, and I floundered. And then
because you weren't coaching, you were just
to use a figure of speech. My wheels got stuck. They were turning, and I wasn't going anywhere. And I experienced a really horrific bout of depression.
Wow.
Really very, very, very dark days where I just really didn't think I would come through it.
Was it a case of maybe having such high moments in your life, being inside or being a superstar?
No, I just came back, and my thing in life, my meaning in life, I think where I can be most significant or helpful to people is to coach. That's my gift. And I came back, and I wasn't practicing my art. I wasn't doing the thing that keeps me fulfilled, and I got lost. And I have tremendous amount of empathy and understand it implicitly. I have a deep understanding of how depression works. And I've read a lot of, when there's articles about it, I always read, and if there's anyone who's experienced something, I'm there to talk to them.
Yeah.
Because it is a frightening thing to go through, and most people just nod and you'll be okay and I'm here for you, and most people just don't get it. They don't get the darkness and how you can completely get lost. And everything is taken away from you. Everything.
Because, as you said, you were comfortable financially and all that kind of stuff.
I was at the point where I didn't think I'd ever coach again. Wow. I thought I was gonna die. One way or another.
As in taking your own life?
I did not see a way out of it. It was so dark, so deep. I just lost all. You lose all sense of.
And we were in New York.
This happened in New York, and then I ended up having to go back to Dublin, and you just lose everything. You lose all sense of sensation, judgment, hunger. You have no desires for anything, any interest. I'm a huge music fan. Wouldn't even pique my interest.
No?
Nothing.
And you went back to Ireland to be close to your family? Do you think that was the solution?
I was worried for myself.
You took that decision yourself then?
Yes.
So you had the strength.
There were other parts to it. It's too deep to go into. I went to a sister of mine in London. I think it was a bad decision. She wanted to help me. We don't really talk. We were never that close. She wanted to help me. And there were people who wanted to help me, but they didn't know how to help me.
Well, it's very difficult, I think, for those who aren't, because I've been around people who are suffering from it as well and talked to them. But I've always used this analogy that if somebody's suffering from cancer or it's heart, it's something physical. But of course, depression is mental. It's in the brain. It's some imbalance there, and it's difficult to relate to it if you're not suffering from it.
So I went back to Dublin, and it was a good friend in the US who came over. His father lives down the road from me, and he was visiting. And, he was able to get through to me. He spoke to me in a way, because he knows me. My family don't know anything about me. Not really. They don't know who I am. I left when I was too young. They don't know anything about coaching. They don't know anything about my life. The only one who would have got it and gets it is my nephew, because he'd been over to visit me. He's older now. At the time, he wouldn't have understood it. So he was able to reach me to the point where it was like a hook that I was able to grab onto. And I went down to the local club, Stella Maris, and I started to slowly but surely get my confidence back. I got back on the field. I was always in supreme shape. I got fit again. I got healthy. And then he called me up and he says, look, I have a good friend of mine in Mexico. He says, I know it's your ambition. You always wanted to speak Spanish. He says, it's your ambition to speak Spanish. He says, I have a friend over there. It's not a lot of money, but you can go over there, coach, learn Spanish. So I didn't even ask about the money. I'd have done it for free. Just packed my bags and I went to Mexico. And the guy called Merrill Wimpany, and he ran a version of a West Ham Academy. It wasn't like an official like West Ham Academy, but we had a name. It was in a franchise. And it was a very good academy. It was great, and that's where that was my first taste of being in a Latino environment. And to be honest, I fell in love with the people and the way of life, and just different warm people, good people, decent, humble, such great humility under difficult circumstances. And I wasn't making any money or anything. A little enough I was, and I was living at the fields in the side of a mountain in a place called Santa Fe, about 27 miles from Mexico City, and I loved it. I particularly loved the programs of football. What an environment, football 24/7. And I really got my hunger, I got my passion back. And lo and behold, I sent a message to a former a guy who was a player at Red Bull New York at the time. It was Metro Stars. A guy called Tab Ramos, very famous player, one of the most iconic US football players. And he was the youth technical director for US. He was Jurgen Klinsmann's assistant, and he was coach of the US U20 team. And I says, hey Tab, I've come back. I says, I don't know if I was in Saudi Arabia and stuff, but I says, I'm back now. And I says, any chance I can get involved with the youth national team programs? I'm living in Mexico. I'd love to. And he goes, yeah. He says, you know what? There's a trip coming up, but I have somebody coming in to cover that. He says, leave it with me. So I got called in for the camp, and I was available to do more camps, and that's when I started working for the US national team. Like, I had a camp every 4 to 6 weeks.
For the under 20s, yeah? And
it was a great experience, because you really... club football is a completely different beast to international football. So and then you begin to see the standards of these kids, what it takes, which kids are making it, which kids are coming in. And we would have various camps: the kids who make it, the kids who don't make it, the kids who go abroad, then the kids who go abroad and are breaking in, and then the kids who are capable of breaking through to the next level. And you realise how incredibly difficult it is to break through.
I'm guessing.
And the sacrifices you need to make, and the dedication, and you need to be lucky. And also at the international level, you're lining up playing against France's U18s, U20s.
Some top professionals there.
These big West African boys, Senegalese parents, and just good fellas who have everything, can run like the wind, jump through the ceiling, strong. They're laughing at you when you're trying to tackle. They're skillful, they're technically astute, they're disciplined. And then because you're at that level, you're seeing the Pogbas and stuff.
Yeah, the elite of the elite.
Yeah, the last U20 World Cup, there was a guy called Zagadou, centre back, plays for Borussia Dortmund. Cost you 50 million if you wanted to buy him, and he was one of many. Yeah, we beat them to knock them out. We got into the quarterfinals, and it was one of the great days for US soccer. But it was a great memory.
It was a great memory.
So I was very thankful to Tab I worked with Tab for a while, but I also worked with an Iranian guy who was his coach of the U18s, and he got an offer to go and coach a club in Iran. So I left and went to live in Iran for a year.
Wow. And that's another link to your current boss.
And Carlos was there at the time.
Yeah.
And my Irish friend was there at the time. So, you know what, I always had hoped, because of the connections, that there was a possibility. You know, I always said, wow, I'd love to work with Carlos one day.
And yeah, your dreams come true. I mean, we could probably do a part 2 on this as it's been going on, but we'll situate it now in the present. Because I think we have slowly come full circle. But I mean, it's a fascinating story. But to work, so you talked about international football being much different to club football.
Yes. The rhythm.
Yeah, is it a case? I was kind of thinking about that. Like in the journalist world, you've got your daily, for newspapers, the daily ones, and they have to throw out stories every couple of hours or whatever nowadays. And then you've the weekend, the Sunday newspapers. They have a little bit more in depth. Is that how you kind of could equate it with this? Because you don't work with the players every day, obviously.
Well, for a guy, I was surprised. I'll go back to Juan Carlos. I was surprised that Juan Carlos was able to coach at the national team level. Nothing to do with ability, but just he's a guy who loves to be on the field. Mm-hmm. And you're not on the field every day. You know, for a guy like I had the good fortune of working with Jürgen Klinsmann's son. He was our goalkeeper for the U20. So Jürgen obviously had coached the German national team, the phenomenal, it's a legendary, iconic player and all, by any standards all over the world. Instantly recognised.
Obviously, yeah. So
through his son playing, obviously I got to form a relationship with him. You know, and over lunch one day, you know, he was saying to me, you know, he's not really a coach in the sense of the X's and O's on the field. He's very much a manager of men and an organizer.
Okay.
And he particularly liked the international rhythm. Because, you see, if you were a coach at the international level and the players come in, and you can't stomach one of them, or several, but you can get through the 10, 14 days. But if you knew that at club level, you have to look at their face every day and deal with that. Some coaches aren't good enough for that. And then there's other coaches where the rhythm suits them better. I mean, the day-to-day of club football is very demanding. It can wear you down. Especially at a big club, yes, the pressure, it's unrelenting.
Yeah, so that's
international level, it has a whole different rhythm to it. You know, you only get to see the players every 2-3 months if you're lucky.
Would I be right in saying it seems a rhythm that suits you as well? Maybe it's just because you're here, kind of.
To be honest, no. I prefer to be on the field every day. 100%.
Okay.
No, I prefer to coach every day, but at the same time, I have to recognise that this is a unique opportunity to.
I mean,
I wake up every day. I mean, it's funny. It's funny. There's the feeling I got since I got this job. People ask me many times, and I wouldn't say I want to get corny and say a religious experience, but just a feeling of enormous gratitude once I got the job. Thankful, all the pieces seemed to come together.
Yeah.
I was thankful of all the people who'd helped me along the way, all the small steps I take, people who were there, people who would influence my career and help me, and it was just an overpowering sense of gratitude. In a way, once it happened, I let go a lot of the baggage, I suppose, that I carried around, resentment. Because sometimes when you get fired or when you don't have the jobs, you think, you know, bitterness. Bitterness is an awful thing. It can come in and eat away like a cancer. You know, I got this job, and not only did I get to get an international job at any level for me, it's great. It's a great thing. It's a great honour. But it was always a country for me. It's number one. It's a South American country. It's exotic. The people are great. The tradition, and then a chance to work with a guy like Carlos at this stage of his career.
Yeah, it's a dream come true, really.
So, and then the type of players that you're working with, and again. Our good the guys I work with, our goalkeepers they're great. They're great fellas. Yeah. But let's take the football out of it. They're really nice. They're good people. They're great to be around. And a guy like Ospina, tremendous humility. A guy who's played over 104 times for his country.
Yeah.
A
legend of the game.
Made his debut at 16.
Mm-hmm.
Went with his girlfriend at 16 without speaking French. Can you imagine that? From Medellin.
Yeah,
I laugh and ask him about it. How was it for him and his wife? Going over there at such an early age, at 16, and then he carved out a career for himself. And he's not a giant. That's one of the first things I said. That's one of the most impressive things about him. To survive in the modern international game when you are not, when I say a giant, the average height now is 6'2". You get guys 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" is nothing. You have to be super secure, you have to be super consistent, because when you're not as tall as the other goalkeepers, you're on a much shorter leash. But he's carved out a tremendous career.
And technically, then I'm guessing
technically very secure.
Because most of these Latinos, I'm guessing, are pretty.
No, he would not be your typical South American goalkeeper, because his formation was not in Colombia, to be honest. The true formation, obviously would have been formed in the versus Básicas here, but his true learning would have occurred in France.
Okay.
And then obviously he learned a lot in Arsenal.
Arsenal, of course, yeah.
And he told me a story that when he initially went, he had done quite well. He had played some games, and they knew that Chesney was leaving at the end of the year, and Wenger was quite happy to give him a shot at being the number one for the next season. But then Peter Cech fell into their lap because he got let go at Chelsea. Yeah. He was in London, he was available, so they weren't going to pass that up. So that's how things.
Them's are the breaks, as they say.
Yeah.
Now I know you have to catch a flight soon enough, so we'll probably have to wrap this up, Des. But just briefly, then, in terms of goals this year, have you sat down and kind of said what you want to do? Obviously, you've mentioned the 8 qualifying games.
Yeah,
crucial.
Look, each international break consists of 2 games. In a perfect world, if we could manage to get 4 points. At each FIFA day, we'll qualify with ease. Mm-hmm. But that's easier said than done, because the South American qualification is a minefield. Mm-hmm.
And obviously, is that the bigger goal, to obviously reach Qatar?
Obviously, there's great expectation. It would be great, and there is obviously an expectation that we're obligated to compete for this.
The Copa America, because it's here, of course.
And hopefully win it. Mm-hmm. But anyone who cares about the development of football in this country in the future, the World Cup is the bigger picture.
Of course. Finally, you can't spell failure without the FAI, the Football Association of Ireland. If they ever came knocking at your door...
that wouldn't happen, no chance.
No chance?
No.
But if it did, hypothetically?
Somebody asked me that before. No, it wouldn't happen. I'm too old. It's not going to happen. No.
You're saying they wouldn't come to you, but if they did, would you consider it?
No, probably not, because it's not gonna do anything for me, and I don't mean it in a financial sense. I mean, coming here wasn't anything to do with money or anything like that. It's just an opportunity. I'm all about experiencing something new.
Yeah,
I'd lived in the States for 20 years, and to be honest, the way the States is now, it's rotten. I have no interest in going back. I can't stand it. When I go over there, it makes my skin crawl listening to some of the people.
Yeah.
So I still like the States, but it holds no great fascination like when I was younger.
Yeah, and I guess you've got a buzz.
I can still, it's great.
Yeah.
Every day here is exciting and stimulating.
Yeah.
And obviously, I speak Spanish. It's reasonable. I study really hard, but obviously I don't speak with complete fluency. So it's just the challenge every day of and just being just the environment, the people, the food, the weather, everything. I mean, it's a huge country.
But Des, I don't want to be the reason for you being sacked if you miss your flight to the States. I won't say why you're going there. We might be giving away too much information. Absolute pleasure. We should nearly probably do part 2.
I'm sure we could.
Yeah, we could indeed.
There's parts I've left out and haven't done justice
Perhaps,
to the role several people have played in it. But
we can't mention it all, Des. Closer to the Copa America, perhaps we'll have you back on the podcast. But that is our lot for this episode, guys. It's been an absolutely intriguing one. You can make contact with me. Still haven't created an actual page for the podcast, but Wrong Way Corrigan blog on Facebook or W Way Corrigan on Twitter. Until the next time, ciao ciao.
Semana.com